So and Rizzo, Terry Fontenot, the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. Everybody's available for media availability this week. And he said something interesting about Kirk Cousins' situation. Kirk Cousins is somebody who was on the books for basically a fully guaranteed contract for the next 3 years, $65 million in dead money if they wanted to get rid of him, so that is not an option. And he said straight up, hey, Michael Penix is our starter, but we're going to keep Cousins around as a backup. And another thing he alluded to that was made available now is that Kirk Cousins was actually hurt, allegedly, a right shoulder injury in that Saints game in Week 10, and he never was the same. And he was on the injury report for the half of the first week. And then Cousins is pretty much an Iron Man. He's always available, but he's always banged up. And whether that's supposed to shed light on the fact on his poor play or whatever it may be, the general manager made it clear that he did not know this. And, hey, when he's on the injury report, we knew about an injury. When he's not, we don't know about it. So that was his sort of pushback that, hey, we didn't really know that Cousins was dealing with something. And I always hate when this comes up after the fact.
Me too.
Because these players, whether players or are trying to tough it up, if you're playing, you're not hurt. If you're hurt, don't play. That's the bottom line. And so if you want to playing 50% and then not telling anybody about it, you can play 50% and people know about it, and you're just toughing it out. And we'll commend you for that. Matthew Stafford separating your shoulder, the whole thing. We'll commend you for that. But not saying anything, playing poorly, and then using that maybe as like a fallacy or
an excuse.
It is. It's excusatory. So off of that, I don't know how I feel about that. But the one thing that came out of that that's interesting is the Falcons are keeping him.
Yeah.
The Falcons are going to they're sticking with this.
You mentioned me the no trade clause.
There's no trade clause. So he'd have to approve of any trade that they were to make if they were able to trade him, but they'd still have to eat up a ton of cap in that case anyway.
Correct. And it's an expensive backup. I think it's embarrassing more than anything to not know of a player's injury. I know if the player doesn't say anything, how the hell do you know? But I think a lot of this situation is embarrassing. The fact that Cousins played really, really bad at the end of the year. I thought that Falcons would make the playoffs towards the end of the year.
But he played better towards in the earlier part of the year. Beat the Eagles. So they took the Chiefs down to the wire. If Cousins was healthy then, and I'm not saying I'm just devil's advocate.
Right.
If he got hurt and then they stunk in the last 6 weeks of the year, where the game when he didn't throw a touchdown for 5 weeks, and he might have been hurt for it. Now we're supposed to say it's embarrassing.
It was an underwhelming year for Cousins, and
he did. It was. But they were winning games. They were 6-3.
Yeah, and 18 touchdowns. The part you couldn't live with were the turnovers, the 16 interceptions, and the fumbles. But 3,500 passing yards. I mean, Kirk is always going to be floating around. You throw the ball so much in a Kirk Cousins offense, he's always going to be floating around with 4,000 yards. But at this point, like, you got to embrace Michael Penix. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you play Penix. In a sense,
is it a problem for you that they're going to stick with him?
It's not. I know you just got done saying the embarrassment thing might be a little bit of a cop out. I just think it's embarrassing. You're paying a guy that much money that was supposed to come in, quarterback the team for the duration of his contract, and then have Penix come in for this to just hit the wall at the end of the year and have everything get thrown under the table and blow up. That's where I think it's embarrassing. That's where I think it's kind of an inept of management. But if I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself, I think a lot of people would give Cousins that money in the offseason with that
great agent.
play.
He's got a great agent his whole career.
But even beyond the agent stuff, Colin, Cousins played really well for the Vikings outside of playoff games. And I know it's a big outside, but I think a lot of teams, let's put Cousins, there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks this year. If Cousins came off of the year he had 2 years ago heading into this quarterback free agency,
he'd be the number one quarterback in the free agent class.
Totally agree.
So at a certain point, you can't blame too much for them giving the contract because they had no answers. That was the Desmond Ritters of the bunch.
But that's why you get Penix, right? Like now the Falcons kind of look like geniuses because, all right, you signed Cousins to the contract.
That's why it's almost a good thing. Instead of being buried with him, they have a backup option.
Right. And trust me, including myself, at the time, I did not understand the whole Michael Penix thing. I kind of lit up the Falcons. What was that? Almost 2 years or a year ago now when they drafted Penix. But who knows? Maybe it's going to work out for the best. Maybe I'll be the one eating the crow.
Well, that's why they do this. Because if Cousins didn't work out, you give him the contract, but you got a guy in a rookie contract right behind him. Yeah, it might hurt you a little bit in the cap space department, but would you rather have a quarterback that you're confident in starting week after week and you're confident in his growth, or would you rather be stuck with a disgruntled, older, aging banged up veteran.
It's a talented team, too. I mean, Bijan Robinson's a good running back. Drake London's a good receiver.
Poorly coached team, but I mean, I can't blame them. They had a backup. They had a
contingency plan.
They did. They had a contingency plan. They had a pure backup that was ready. And whether he's ready or not is another question. And yeah, you're going to burn some money here, but that's why you draft him. So you're ready for this situation instead of being the team that is stuck in a terrible contract.
And if Penix doesn't play well, you could go to Cousins. I know it's like you don't want to do that. You don't want to be maneuvering and switching quarterbacks.
No.
You want to stick with a guy, Colin. But God forbid Penix kind of has a year like Bryce Young or something. Well, you got someone to go to maybe that could win you some football games.
If it's a confidence thing, absolutely. If you have plans to go back to him, who knows? Russo and Rizzo on ESPN 106.